On May 29, 1453, the last Roman emperor died fighting on the walls of his city. Constantine the Found threw off his imperial regalia so the enemy wouldn't recognize him, and charged into the breach like a common soldier. His body was never found. That morning, Constantinople had been the greatest city in Christendom. By afternoon, it belonged to the Ottomans. 1,000 years of history ended in a single day. But here's the truth they don't teach you. Byzantium didn't fall on May 29, 1453. It had been falling for centuries. The final day was just the moment everyone stopped pretending otherwise. This is the story of how empires die, not in an instant, but slowly, imperceptibly, one compromise at a time, until the day there's nothing left to compromise. The empire that refused to die. Most people don't realize Byzantium was Rome. When the Western Roman Empire fell in 476, everyone assumes Rome ended. But the eastern half didn't just survive. It thrived. For 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, Byzantine emperors ruled from Constantinople, calling themselves Romans, speaking Greek, preserving everything the West had lost. While Western Europe descended into the Dark Ages, Byzantium shone. Its libraries held the works of Plato and Aristotle. Its architects built the Hagia Sophia, a dome so massive medieval Europeans thought it was held up by angels. Its walls were so formidable they turned back armies for 800 years. At its height under Justinian in the 6th century, Byzantium reconquered Italy, North Africa, and southern Spain. The Mediterranean was Roman again. It looked like the empire had been reborn. But empires aren't measured by their peaks. They're measured by how they handle decline, and Byzantium's decline would last 700 years. The slow bleed. The thing about Byzantine history is this: it's a study in resilience, and the cost of resilience. After Justinian, the empire faced wave after wave of existential threats. The Persians invaded from the east. The Arabs exploded out of the desert, conquering Syria, Egypt, and North Africa in a single generation. The Bulgars hammered the empire from the north. The Seljuk Turks shattered Byzantine power at Manzikert in 1071, where the emperor himself was captured. Each time, Byzantium bent. Each time it survived. But survival came at a price. To pay for armies, emperors debased the currency. The solidus, once the most trusted coin in the world, was slowly mixed with cheaper metals until it was worth a fraction of its former value. To secure the borders, emperors made deals with enemies, paying tribute to keep the peace. To maintain the army, they militarized society, turning free peasants into soldiers and granting land to military aristocrats who became powers unto themselves. With each crisis, the empire grew smaller. With each solution, it grew weaker. This is the paradox of survival. The things you do to stay alive can be the things that kill you slowly. The Fourth Crusade, the wound that never healed. In 1204, something unthinkable happened. The Fourth Crusade, supposed to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim rule, instead turned on Constantinople. Christian soldiers sacked the greatest Christian city on earth. For 3 days they burned libraries. They melted down ancient artwork for the metal. They desecrated churches, parading prostitutes on the altar of the Hagia Sophia. They stole relics, treasures, the accumulated wealth of centuries. Venice took 4 bronze horses from the Hippodrome. They still stand in St. Mark's Square today, a monument to the day the West betrayed the East. The empire shattered into fragments. Latin kingdoms ruled Constantinople for 60 years. When the Byzantines finally retook their capital in 1261, they found a shell. The population had fallen from 400,000 to 35,000. The palaces were ruins. The treasury was empty. The walls were crumbling. Byzantium would survive another 200 years, but it would never recover. This is what collapse looks like. Not a single catastrophe, but a wound that never heals, slowly draining the life from what remains. the Empire of Ghosts. By the 14th century, Byzantium was an empire in name only. The Roman Empire controlled Constantinople and a few scattered territories. Everything else was gone. The emperors still wore purple. They still performed ancient ceremonies. They still called themselves rulers of Rome. But everyone knew the truth. The Ottomans surrounded them on all sides, slowly strangling what remained. Byzantine emperors became vassals, paying tribute to Turkish sultans, sending their sons as hostages to ensure obedience. Inside the city, civil wars erupted. Aristocratic families fought over a throne that ruled almost nothing. Each war cost money the empire didn't have, money borrowed from Genoese and Venetian bankers at interest rates that could never be repaid. The population continued to fall. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned. Farms inside the city walls stood empty. The great forums where emperors once addressed hundreds of thousands echoed with silence. Byzantium was a ghost empire, maintaining the appearance of power long after the substance had vanished. But appearances matter. As long as Constantinople stood, as long as the emperor wore the purple, as long as the Romans refused to surrender, the idea of Rome survived. Sometimes the idea is all you have left. The final warning. By 1450, everyone knew the end was near. The Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, made his intentions clear. He built a fortress on the Bosphorus, cutting off Constantinople's supply lines. He assembled the largest cannons ever made, bronze monsters that could hurl stone balls weighing 600 pounds. The Byzantines begged the West for help. Emperor Constantine I offered to reunify the Orthodox and Catholic churches, ending a schism that had lasted 400 years, if only the Pope would send armies. The West sent warm words. It sent prayers. It sent a few hundred soldiers, not enough to matter, not nearly enough. When Mehmed's army arrived in April 1453, they numbered 80,000. Inside Constantinople, Constantine had 7,000 defenders. The disparity was so absurd it was almost comical. Except no one was laughing. The siege. For 53 days the cannons fired, day and night. The walls that had stood for 1,000 years began to crack. Inside the city, people prayed. They held processions. They carried icons through the streets, believing that God would not allow his city to fall. They had survived so many times before. Constantine knew better. He spent his nights riding the walls, encouraging his soldiers. He knew they couldn't win. But he also knew that surrender wasn't an option. Not because of pride, because of what Constantinople meant. As long as the city stood, Rome existed. The moment it fell, 1,000 years of continuity would end. On May 28th, Constantine addressed his soldiers one last time. He told them they were defending not just a city, but civilization itself. The next morning, the Ottomans attacked. The last day. The final assault began before dawn. Wave after wave of Ottoman soldiers threw themselves at the walls. The defenders, exhausted after weeks of siege, fought with desperation. Then someone made a mistake. A minor gate, the Kirko Porta, was left unlocked. A handful of Ottoman soldiers found it. They poured through. When the defenders realized the enemy was inside the walls, panic spread. Constantine I, the last Roman emperor, heard that the Ottomans had broken through. He could have fled. Ships waited in the harbor. He could have escaped to Italy, set up a government in exile, kept the idea of Byzantium alive. Instead, he removed his imperial regalia and charged into battle. "The city is fallen," he reportedly said, "and I am still alive." He died fighting. The empire died with him. The philosophy of gradual collapse. Byzantium teaches us something profoundly important. Empires don't usually end with a bang. They end with a whimper that lasts centuries. The final fall is dramatic, but the real story is the slow erosion that makes the final fall inevitable. Byzantium survived. The Persians, the Arabs, the Bulgars, the Seljuks, the Crusaders, civil wars, plagues, famines, betrayals. Each time it paid a price. It sold land to pay mercenaries. It debased currency to fund wars. It made alliances with enemies. It compromised principles to survive one more year. These weren't wrong choices. They were the only choices, but each one weakened the foundation just a little more. This is how empires die. Not from a single wound, but from 1,000 cuts, each one survivable, each one necessary, each one bringing the end a little closer. The modern mirror. We recognize this pattern because we see it everywhere. Companies that were giants slowly decline into irrelevance. They make reasonable decisions at every turn, but each decision is reactive. Each one sacrifices the future to survive the present. Relationships end the same way, not from one fight, but from 1,000 small surrenders. Compromises that seem necessary at the time, but slowly erode what made the relationship worth fighting for. Civilizations follow the same path. They face crises, they adapt, they survive. But adaptation has a cost, and not all costs are obvious until it's too late. Byzantium lasted 1,000 years by being endlessly adaptable. It survived longer than any empire in history by refusing to die. But there's a difference between surviving and thriving. By the end, Byzantium was so focused on survival, it forgot what it was surviving for. The final lesson. On May 29, 1453, the Ottoman soldiers broke through the walls. They found Constantine's body days later, identified only by the purple boots half buried in a pile of corpses. The city they conquered was magnificent still. The Hagia Sophia stood. The walls, though breached, still towered. The palaces, though empty, still echoed with grandeur. But Byzantium was already gone. It had been gone for a long time. The final battle was just the moment everyone stopped pretending. The warning Byzantium offers isn't about military might. It's not about building better walls or having bigger armies. It's about understanding that survival isn't victory. That buying time isn't the same as building a future. That you can make all the right tactical decisions and still be marching toward defeat. Empires fall slowly, then all at once. The all at once is what people remember. The slowly is what they should have noticed. Because the final day is never the real story. The real story is the 1,000 days before, when everyone knew something was wrong but believed they had more time. Byzantium had 1,000 years. It used every minute of them, until one morning the minutes ran out. The question isn't whether empires fall. They all do. The question is whether we recognize the slow fall while there's still time to change direction, or whether we too will fight heroically on the last day of an empire we could have saved on any of the 1,000 days before.